And the fifth treasure principle key, you say, is giving is the only antidote to materialism. You know, you're just talking about this. And I just thought this was so funny because you kind of tell this story, and I quote you here. It says, yeah, you know, you may think no problem there. I'm putting my church and ministries in my will. You know, by all means, do your estate planning and give heavily to God's kingdom. But what kind of trust does it take to part with your money once you die? You don't have any choice. Death isn't your best opportunity to give, it's the end of your opportunity to give. God rewards acts of faith done while we're still living.
Right. There are a lot of people that I know that say, okay, the more I accumulate, the more that I have set aside, the more I'll one day be able to give. Well, there's a problem, there's a lot of problems with procrastinated giving. Because Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Not where you one day hope your treasure to be. Not where you one day think you're going to put your treasure. Not where you even one day plan to put your treasure is where your heart is. Your treasure is, your heart is where your treasure is now. So if you're not investing heavily in your church and meeting the needs of the poor and world missions and all these things now, your heart won't be in those things. Your heart will be wherever your treasure is. So if your treasure is just in all this stuff that you've amassed, that's where your heart is. And now you're held in orbit around it. And God calls us to break free of that hold. That's what lordship is. God is the master. He's the master of our life. If money and possessions are our masters, we're going to live our lives around them. If Jesus is our master and becomes our master as we break the back of materialism, which is exactly what 1 Timothy 6 is talking about. There's one way you can be rich in this world and praise and please God and actually store up treasures in heaven. There's only one. That is if you don't put your hope in them, you're not prideful, you're generous, eager to share, rich in good deeds. That's the one way you can break the back of materialism. Otherwise, it will hold you, it will grip you, and ultimately, it'll destroy your life, and sadly, it will destroy your children's lives. If they are raised in presumption and entitlement and where prosperity is simply the air they breathe without some view of the generosity that extends to God's kingdom. So I would say this: don't be nearly as concerned about how large of an inheritance you will leave your children. And a large enough inheritance will probably ruin them. And the studies just show that, even secular studies. But don't be concerned about how large an inheritance you will leave your children. Be concerned about the spiritual heritage you will leave your children. And if you leave your children giving and a beautiful view and a high view of giving, it will be transformative.